Thank you so much for staying on the AM show. It's now time to have that important discussion on my industry, the media, and it's also important to you, a very vital part of our democracy that must not be undermined. And you know, over the years, we've relied on external reports about how the Ghanaian media is faring. Recently, we shared one with you from the US State Department on human rights violations, but largely focused on what's happening within the media space, which is very important. So the University of Ghana's School or Department of Communication Studies, I beg your pardon, is hoping to change that story. And this morning, I've been joined by Dr. Abena Enimwa Benin. She's the head of the department, and Kweku Korbia Asante, Communication Lead, Media Foundation for West Africa. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy to see you, Doc, because last year we had this conversation, and you did promise, and I'm grateful that you delivered on that promise, to have this report published. First off, tell us why it was important and the period of study.
Right. So, you're right in saying that when we joined you last year at the launch of our 50th anniversary, we promised that as part of our celebrations, we're going to come out with this report in which we tried to test the pulse, the health of the Ghanaian media across different subjects. So we've done research on media ownership and regulation. We've done research on working conditions in the media, the safety of journalists, media financial viability, professional practice, so a host of things that we've tried to gather evidence from the field to let us be able to inform, hopefully, policy and action. So we've done this because we understand that for any progressive organization, society, industry, sector, etc., it is important every so often to go back and see what are we doing, what do we need to improve, and how do we go about it? We believe that it takes rigorous research evidence to be able to do that kind of introspection and targeting going forward. And so the idea of this report was to allow media stakeholders empirical evidence so that it's no longer anecdotal claims, it's no longer people's opinions about the media. Now we have the research before us so that if any policymaker, action person was interested in correcting problems within the media, now there is the empirics with which to so do. We've done this research across, I think, about 2 years. That's how long we've been taking the evidence, culminating into the various chapters that we're reporting on.
Well, that would be quite a detailed report, I guess. Kweku Korbia Asante, tell us what some of the highlights are. What did you discover?
Okay. So, like you mentioned, it's a very detailed report. It touches on safety of journalist issues, media ownership issues, working conditions of the Ghanaian media, or the situation that journalists face, issues on financial viability of the media. And we have findings across all those various key areas that we studied. Let me start with the safety of journalist situation, because you were referring to the study from the US State Department, which made some claims on the safety of journalists. We found out that, look, increasingly journalists are beginning to feel unsafe, insecure in the working environment where they find themselves. And more, the category of journalists who are being at that risk is investigative journalists because of what they are trying to do, which is also something that we need very much here, accountability journalism. And then the groups of people we are finding to be the perpetrators, the leading perpetrators, are people from the government, security, political parties, are those group of people. And it's pretty much profound or worrying, if I should say, that the security officials who are supposed to be protecting citizens, protecting journalists, are among the group of people who lead in terms of perpetrators against journalists. Then there are the working conditions of the Ghanaian media. The study found that many journalists and media people, for instance, don't have contracts that they are working with, right? Welfare issues. Journalists are among some of the poorly paid people in Ghana. And situations like that, including conversations around Solé, because, talking about the problem of pay, remuneration, and what journalists are therefore doing, that is impacting on the output of journalists' contribution to nation building and democracy, which is also another aspect of of the study, another finding that the study made in that order. Yeah.
All right. So we'll be telling you shortly how you can access this report, because I'm already itching to read what the details are. And when he spoke about Solly, I just had a smirk on my face because it's something that many people consider very dehumanizing in a certain way. But like he said, for many people who work in not so well established media institutions, they can't help but accept it. But the other side of it is whether or not these monies they collect influence their work as journalists and who their allegiance is to. So tell us, Doc, how do we access this report and when will it be launched?
We're launching the report tomorrow, God willing, at 10:30 on the University of Ghana campus Center for Biodiversity Research. People used to know it as the Center for African Wetlands. So on UG campus tomorrow at 10:30, we launch the report, and immediately after the launch event, it goes live on the department's website so that people can access it. It's a free to access document. Those who come to the event tomorrow are getting printed copies, but thereafter it's available forever and ever for anybody to be able to access it. And the decision to make it free and that accessible is so that anybody who has an interest in improvements in the media doesn't have to struggle in finding the evidence with which to make changes.
And Doc has been very kind in the way she's, in my words, courting policymakers and persons interested. But how do we move this beyond that to more of a not very compulsive, but a strong indication that we must pay attention to this and we must push it in the faces of those who matter, i.e. politicians, security, owners, you know, because when we begin to sit and wait and say, oh, okay, you know, sometimes things don't work that way. I'm just wondering if there's an agenda to be a bit forceful about this.
Well, so for us at Media Foundation for West Africa, for instance, we have been echoing some of these statements again and again. What this does is to provide that empirical evidence for people like us, civil society, advocacy groups, okay, to therefore base on it as this is the evidence, and so we are moving with it. Also tomorrow we are bringing together all these key stakeholders you mentioned, media owners, security organizations, the ministry, which is representing the government side of the conversation, and all those key stakeholders who matter in this conversation to come see what is found on these matters. And then, of course, the other groups of people like us, civil society, who are going to drive the change, move with such conversation, are also going to be present. And we are saying this is like a tool, this is like an arsenal that we are going to work with to look for that change. We are going to always make that noise, but we always need something that is good enough, solid, so that it moves from we have seen an anecdote to we have found, because there has been an empirical study to that effect.
If I may just quickly chip in, we do also plan post the launch of the event some key stakeholder engagement activities. So meetings with, say, regulators, GIBA, independent broadcasters, so key stakeholder organizations. We do plan to sit down with them and pick out aspects of the report that specifically matter to them or that they are positioned to cause change on, and bring their minds to some of the recommendations that we make relative to those issues. We also hope that the media would support us in sustaining conversations on the issues emanating out of the report, because I think that is very critical. We have the unique position of setting agenda and shaping opinions. And so if the media demonstrates keen interest in this report, which is about us, if we take it up and continue to keep the conversations on it alive, then policy people, key stakeholders would have more pressure on their doorsteps to try and pay attention to some of the things that need changing.
And you know what they say, we are accused of being strong fighters for others and not ourselves.
Exactly.
So hopefully with this, that narrative will change. But another reason I'm particularly happy about this report is I recall the last time I discussed the Press Freedom Index with Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah. One of his issues of contention was, why are we relying on external reports on things that happen here. And it was almost difficult to argue or to debate with him because he kept raising that.
Right.
And so I'm happy. Now, this is home-based, study focusing on us as a Ghanaian people. But Doc, how often will we see this?
So a part of the reason this hasn't been happening in Ghana and why the argument about it's external, the evidence is coming from external would be, is because funding is a challenge. I mean, it takes some money to gather the kind of evidence nationwide that we've been able to gather in this report. And so resources is always a concern. We hope that the strategies we've used in raising funds to do this report would continue to be effective in the future to allow us to be able to launch a similar report every 3 years. So we envisage this to be a triennial report. Other industries do similar things. For instance, ISA does the state of the Ghanaian media economy. We don't think that the state of the Ghanaian economy, the media doesn't turn around that quickly for us to want to be doing this every year. Not that much would have changed in the story. So we think that by 3 years, every 3 years, there will be enough evidence to be able to trend out and see what are the patterns, what is changing, what is stagnating, etc., etc. So we look to this being a triennial affair, granting that we'll be able to secure funding to be able to do this. And yeah.
So remind us of the launch time again, and if anybody wants to be there in person, is there the opportunity?
Right. So tomorrow at 10:30, Center for Biodiversity Research on the University of Ghana campus, we launch this. Director General GBC is the keynote speaker. But the launch being physical there doesn't mean people who are unable to be there physically would not be able to participate nor see what we're sharing in the report. In fact, Joy News, your true lovely self, you'll be carrying it live on the channel, but also on your Facebook page. And so there is opportunity for people to participate in the program, even when they cannot be physical. And we made that provision, and we're so thankful to Multimedia for agreeing to this, because we think conversations about the media shouldn't only be by media people. Ghanaians should care about the media. It is the very foundation of the democracy we practice, as you alluded to earlier. So we should all have an interest in the health of the media if we are interested in sustaining the health of our democracy.
And before I let you go, since you said health, what will your diagnosis be generally? Based on the report, are we a healthy media in Ghana, or are we on the verge of developing a chronic disease, or what exactly are we? What's the status of our health?
Well, the Ghanaian media, it's not healthy. It's far from being active health-wise, or far from being a very strong person for what it's supposed to be. Ghana's media is on support system now, from what we are seeing, from safety of journalists situations, from financial viability conversations, from conversation on the working conditions of journalists, on conversations about their contribution to national development, on their own ethics and things that they are supposed to be abided by. There are a lot of flaws and gaps that the media needs help in trying to achieve in that regard. And so, which is why it's important that people have copies of this, people join us in the launch, analyze the report, digest them, and see the next step of action that we can take to keep the media active, strong, and healthy to drive the national development agenda.
As doctors do usually, the consult. Do you agree, Doc? Is that a fair diagnosis?
I think so. In fact, if we're in COVID time still, so as the COVID people would tell us, there are fundamental, what is it they use? Underlying conditions and comorbidities.
Okay.
There are problems that can work with each other to make us really worse off if we don't begin to pursue reforms in the media. And I believe that the State of the Ghanaian Media Report gives us some lens as to how do we begin to pursue these reforms that are needed.
I'm grateful that you joined me this morning. This morning we've been talking about the State of the Ghanaian Media Report, which will be launched tomorrow. I can't wait. I really can't wait to read that report, and definitely we'll be here to tease out all the very important details for you much later. But the launch is at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow at the University of Ghana's Biodiversity Center. Okay, used to be the Center for West African Wetlands. So, just so you, but if you're not able to join physically, please, you can find your way on social media. Joy News on TV will be carrying that event live for you. And like my guests have said, this is important for all of us because the media doesn't work in isolation. We work with you and you work with us. And so please, let's just all focus on this report and take us out of the ICU so that we can perform our roles better. This morning I've been speaking to Kweku Krobi Asante. He is communication lead with the Media Foundation for West Africa, and Dr. Abena Yeboah, Benin. She's head Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana. Let me say thank you to you once again. I appreciate your company. Well, Benjamin and I will be back shortly to get interactive with you. Do stay.